The call to prayer echoes across rolling hills dotted with ancient stone houses, their weathered walls holding secrets that most tourists will never hear, while millions flock to Istanbul's Grand Bazaar and Cappadocia's fairy chimneys. There's another Turkey that exists in quiet defiance of the modern world. A Turkey where your neighbor's grandmother still reads coffee grounds to predict your future, where marriage proposals happen through elaborate family negotiations, and where a single misstep in social etiquette can turn an entire village against you. This isn't the Turkey you see on travel blogs or Instagram feeds. This is the Turkey where tradition runs so thick you can taste it in the morning tea, where ancient customs blend seamlessly with satellite dishes, and where the wrong glance at someone else's daughter might land you in more trouble than you bargained for. We're about to pull back the curtain on rural Turkish life, complete with its beautiful contradictions, unspoken rules, and yes, those forbidden traditions that locals whisper about but outsiders rarely witness. Forget everything you think you know about Turkey. The real story starts in villages with unpronounceable names, where donkeys still deliver groceries, and where your biggest concern isn't finding Wi-Fi, but understanding why the entire neighborhood just went silent when you walked by. From the Aegean coastline to the remote corners of Anatolia, we're exposing the untold side of Turkey that guidebooks won't dare mention. The question isn't whether you can survive on $600 a month in these villages. The question is whether you can survive the social minefield that comes with it. Because in rural Turkey, money might buy you a house, but it won't buy you acceptance. And trust me, you'll need both. So settle in as we venture beyond the tourist traps and into the heart of the Turkey that operates by its own ancient playbook. Fair warning though, once you see this side of the country, those sanitized travel documentaries will never look the same again. Turkey's villages aren't just scattered randomly across the landscape like dice thrown by a careless god. Each settlement tells a story written in stone, soil, and survival instinct. From the wine-growing valleys of Cappadocia to the olive groves clinging to Aegean hillsides, geography here doesn't just provide a pretty backdrop. It dictates everything from what you eat for breakfast to whom you read aloud to marry. The Anatolian plateau stretches like a massive carpet across central Turkey, its endless wheat fields broken only by the occasional village that looks like it was dropped there by accident. These aren't the picture-perfect Mediterranean coastal towns that grace travel magazines. These are working villages where winter temperatures can drop to -20 Celsius, where the nearest hospital might be 3 hours away by bus, and where your survival depends entirely on how well you get along with your neighbors. Head west toward the Aegean Sea, and the landscape transforms into terraced hillsides covered in olive trees that have been producing fruit since before America was even discovered. The villages here cling to mountainsides like barnacles on a ship's hull. Their stone houses withered by centuries of Mediterranean wind and salt air. Each village specializes in something: olives, grapes, herbs, or tourism, and the locals guard their trade secrets like family heirlooms. But it's in the Black Sea region where geography really shows its teeth. Villages perched on impossibly steep slopes, accessible only by winding roads that would make a mountain goat nervous. The constant mist and rain create a landscape so green it hurts your eyes. But it also creates isolation that breeds traditions you won't find anywhere else in Turkey. Some villages here still practice customs that would make anthropologists weep with joy, and human rights activists weep for entirely different reasons. The Mediterranean coast offers a different flavor of rural life entirely. Villages here have learned to balance ancient ways with modern tourism, creating a hybrid culture that's part authentic tradition and part performance art. Fishermen still mend their nets at dawn, but they're just as likely to be planning their afternoon English lesson to better communicate with the German retirees who've been buying up village properties. Then there's Eastern Anatolia, where villages can be snowed in for months at a time, where satellite internet is still considered a luxury, and where the nearest paved road might as well be on another planet. These communities have developed a self-sufficiency that would impress any survivalist, but they've also maintained social structures that would make a sociologist's head spin. The geography doesn't just influence what grows in the ground, it shapes what grows in the mind. Coastal villages tend toward openness, influenced by centuries of trade and cultural exchange. Mountain villages lean conservative, their isolation breeding traditions that sometimes clash spectacularly with modern Turkish law. Plains villages fall somewhere in between, practical and adaptable, but always cautious of change. Understanding this geographical diversity is crucial because it means there's no single Turkish village experience. The elderly woman making cheese in a Black Sea hamlet lives in a completely different world from the olive farmer in an Aegean valley. Even though they're technically part of the same country, each region has developed its own dialect, its own customs, its own unwritten rules about everything from courtship to conflict resolution. The rooster that wakes you at 4:30 in the morning isn't being inconsiderate. He is simply following a schedule that rural Turkey has maintained for centuries. By the time most city dwellers are having their first cup of coffee, village life has already shifted into second gear, with farmers checking livestock, women preparing the day's bread, and children completing chores that would exhaust most suburban teenagers. This isn't the rushed, caffeine-fueled existence of urban Turkey. Village time moves differently, measured not by clocks, but by natural rhythms that haven't changed since the Ottoman Empire. The call to prayer provides structure, but the real schedule revolves around seasonal cycles, weather patterns, and community obligations that take precedence over individual plans. Family structure here operates like a well-oiled machine with clearly defined roles. That would seem archaic to modern sensibilities, but somehow manage to keep entire communities functioning smoothly. The patriarch makes major decisions, but don't mistake this for simple male dominance. Village politics are far more nuanced. The eldest woman in the family often wields considerable behind-the-scenes influence, especially in matters concerning marriages, family disputes, and social standing. Multi-generational households are the norm, with grandparents, parents, and children sharing space in ways that would drive most Westerners to therapy. Privacy is a luxury that simply doesn't exist in the Western sense. Everyone knows everyone else's business, not out of nosiness, but out of necessity. In communities where survival depends on cooperation, keeping secrets can be viewed as antisocial behavior. The tea house serves as the village's unofficial parliament, courthouse, and entertainment center rolled into one. This is where men gather to discuss everything from crop prices to political developments, where disputes get resolved through lengthy negotiations rather than formal legal proceedings, and where newcomers get sized up and either accepted or quietly excluded from community life. Women's social networks operate parallel to the tea house culture, centered around daily bread-making sessions, market trips, and extended family visits. These gatherings serve multiple functions: information exchange, mutual support, and subtle social policing. The woman who violates community standards will find herself gradually excluded from these networks, which in a small village amounts to social death. Work patterns follow seasonal rhythms that would confuse most modern employers. During harvest time, everyone works from dawn to dusk regardless of their official occupation. The village teacher might spend weekends helping with olive picking, while the local mechanic transforms into a part-time farmer when his family's crops need attention. Children grow up with responsibilities that would shock helicopter parents. 6-year-olds tend younger siblings, help with livestock, and contribute to household income through small tasks. This isn't child labor in the exploitative sense. It is community survival training that prepares them for adult responsibilities, while keeping families economically viable. The concept of retirement doesn't really exist in the Western sense. Elderly villagers continue contributing according to their abilities, whether through crafts, childcare, or serving as repositories of traditional knowledge. The grandmother who can predict weather patterns by watching bird behavior isn't considered superstitious. She has a valuable community resource whose knowledge keeps crops alive and families fed. Evening entertainment revolves around storytelling, music, and communal activities that bring generations together. Television exists, but it competes with traditional pastimes that have survived because they serve social functions. Beyond mere entertainment, the grandfather teaching traditional songs to his grandsons isn't just preserving culture. He is strengthening family bonds and community identity. The kitchen in a Turkish village isn't just a room where food gets prepared. It is command central for family survival, social status, and cultural preservation. The woman who can bake perfect bread, preserve vegetables for winter, and feed unexpected guests with whatever is on hand holds a position of respect that no amount of formal education can match. Bread making happens daily, not because villagers can't afford store-bought loaves, but because fresh bread represents self-sufficiency and proper housekeeping. The woman whose bread comes out uneven or poorly risen will face gentle but persistent criticism from neighbors who view cooking skills as a reflection of character. The aroma of fresh bread baking in stone ovens still permeates village mornings, competing with the scent of wood smoke and brewing tea. Turkish village cuisine operates on principles of preservation, seasonality, and making the most of limited resources. Families still make their own cheese, cure their own olives, and dry vegetables for winter consumption. These aren't quaint customs maintained for tourist appeal. They rate economic necessities that determine whether families eat well during lean months. The breakfast spread in a village household would make most hotel buffets look pathetic by comparison. Fresh cheese made from the family's goats, olives cured in the backyard, honey from local hives, and eggs from chickens that roam freely around the property. Add homemade jam, fresh tomatoes still warm from the garden, and bread that's never seen the inside of a factory, and you've got a meal that costs almost nothing to produce, but delivers nutrition that puts expensive organic food to shame. Tea culture in Turkish villages operates on a level of complexity that would impress Japanese tea ceremony masters. The correct preparation involves specific water temperatures, steeping times, and serving protocols that vary by region and occasion. Refusing tea when offered is considered rude, but accepting it incorrectly can mark you as an outsider. The size of tea glass you're offered, the strength of the brew, and even the number of sugar cubes provided send subtle social signals about your status in the community. Turkish coffee holds even more cultural significance, reserved for special occasions and important conversations. The woman who can prepare coffee properly, thick, aromatic, and served with just the right amount of foam demonstrates sophistication and cultural knowledge. Coffee fortune-telling remains a serious practice, with skilled readers capable of providing surprisingly accurate insights based on the patterns left by coffee grounds. Aegean, the traditional yogurt drink, serves as both beverage and light meal, especially during hot weather and physically demanding work. Village Aegean bears no resemblance to the watery commercial versions sold in cities. Made from thick, homemade yogurt, it provides probiotics, protein, and cooling relief that keep field workers functioning during brutal summer heat. Seasonal eating isn't a trendy lifestyle choice in villages, it is an economic reality that shapes the entire food culture. Spring means wild greens gathered from hillsides. Summer brings fresh vegetables and fruit-preserving marathons. Autumn centers round nut and grape harvests, and winter relies on preserved foods supplemented by hearty stews that stretch limited meat supplies. The communal aspect of village dining extends beyond family meals to community feasts that celebrate religious holidays, weddings, and seasonal milestones. These events involve entire neighborhoods in food preparation, serving, and cleanup. The family that skimps on their contribution or fails to help properly will find themselves gradually excluded from future invitations. Alcohol consumption varies dramatically by region and religious observance. But even in conservative villages, traditional fermented beverages sometimes appear at weddings and harvest celebrations. The homemade wine hidden in certain basements isn't necessarily breaking religious law. It is often considered medicine or traditional craft rather than recreational drinking. Romance in Turkish villages operates according to rules so complex. They make international diplomacy look straightforward. Forget everything you think you know about dating, relationships. In marriage, in rural Turkey, love might be universal, but expressing it requires navigating social protocols that have been refined over centuries. The concept of casual dating simply doesn't exist in most villages. When a young man shows interest in a young woman, he's essentially announcing his intention to marry her, which immediately involves both families in a process that can take months, or even years to resolve. The days of Romeo and Juliet secret meetings are largely fantasy here. Most romantic encounters happen under the watchful eyes of family members, neighbors, and community elders who consider matchmaking a serious responsibility. Women's roles in village society create fascinating contradictions that outsiders often misunderstand. While traditional gender roles might appear restrictive from a Western perspective, village women often wield considerable power within their spheres of influence. The mother who successfully marries off her children to good families gains enormous social status, while the woman who manages household finances effectively can influence major family decisions, even in seemingly patriarchal households. Education levels among village women vary dramatically by region and generation, creating internal tensions that sometimes boil over into family conflicts. The grandmother who never learned to read might clash with her college-educated daughter-in-law over child-rearing practices, while the young woman with a university degree might find herself expected to abandon career aspiration for traditional domestic roles. Secret courtships do exist, but they require elaborate precautions and usually involve intermediaries who can provide plausible cover for meetings. The young man who wants to court a village girl might rely on his sister to carry messages, or use religious festivals and market days as opportunities for brief, chaperone conversations. Getting caught in unauthorized romantic contact can result in serious social consequences for both parties, including forced marriage or complete social ostracism. Arranged marriages haven't disappeared entirely, though they've evolved into more subtle forms of family matchmaking. Parents might suggest suitable partners, arrange accidental meetings, or use extended family networks to identify potential matches. The pressure to marry within acceptable social and economic parameters remains intense, with families going to elaborate lengths to research potential in-laws' reputations, financial stability, and moral character. The engagement process itself can last years, with formal ceremonies, gift exchanges, and detailed negotiations over everything from wedding expenses to future living arrangements. Breaking an engagement brings shame on both families and can affect the marriage prospects of siblings and cousins. The young woman whose engagement ends badly might find herself effectively unmarriageable within her village, forcing families to consider relocating or accepting significantly less desirable matches. Wedding celebrations consume enormous resources and serve as major social events that reinforce community bonds while demonstrating family status. The family that throws a substandard wedding will face social consequences that last for generations, while those who celebrate too extravagantly might be viewed as showing off inappropriately. Divorce remains highly stigmatized, especially for women, who often lose custody of children and face limited remarriage prospects. The divorced woman in a village setting occupies a precarious social position, dependent on family support and community tolerance that can evaporate quickly if she violates behavioral expectations. Domestic violence exists, but gets addressed through community intervention, rather than formal legal channels. The husband who abuses his wife might face pressure from male relatives, religious leaders, and community elders who view family harmony as essential to village stability. However, this informal justice system sometimes prioritizes keeping families together over protecting individual rights. Childbearing expectations create additional pressures, with families monitoring new brides for signs of pregnancy and offering unsolicited advice about everything from diet to supernatural fertility treatments. The couple that remains childless faces increasing social pressure and whispered speculation about medical problems, religious punishment, or hidden moral failings. Modern communication technology has introduced new complications to traditional courtship patterns. Young people with smartphones can now conduct secret relationships through messaging apps, but getting caught with inappropriate communications can result in confiscated phones, restricted movement, and increased family supervision. The celebration calendar in Turkish villages reads like an anthropologist's dream journal, packed with festivals that blend Islamic traditions, pre-Islamic customs, and local innovations into events that would leave most party planners exhausted just watching. These aren't tourist attractions or museum pieces. They array living traditions that serve crucial social functions, while providing some of the most authentic cultural experiences you'll find anywhere in the Mediterranean region. Harvest festivals transform entire villages into celebration zones, with families competing to display their best produce while sharing traditional foods. that showcase seasonal ingredients. The grape harvest in Aegean villages becomes a community-wide event, where everyone from toddlers to grandparents contributes to picking, sorting, and processing. The family that produces the best wine or grape molasses gains bragging rights that last until the next harvest, while those who fail to maintain quality standards face gentle but persistent social pressure to improve. Religious festivals provide structure for the village social calendar, but they also serve as opportunities for displaying family status, settling disputes, and arranging marriages. Ramadan evenings bring entire neighborhoods together for iftar meals that can stretch for hours, with families taking turns hosting gatherings that require weeks of preparation. The family that serves substandard food or fails to invite appropriate guests will find themselves discussed in hushed tones long after the festival ends. Circumcision ceremonies represent major family investments that can consume months of income while providing entertainment for entire villages. These events aren't just religious obligations. They're social productions that demonstrate family prosperity, cultural knowledge, and community connections. The father who throws a memorable circumcision party gains social capital that benefits his entire family, while those who celebrate modestly risk being viewed as either poor or insufficiently committed to tradition. Wedding seasons turn villages into staging areas for elaborate productions that would make Hollywood event coordinators weep with envy. Traditional village weddings can last for days, with separate events for men and women, elaborate costume changes, and enough food to feed small armies. The music, dancing, and ceremonial activities follow scripts that have been refined over generations, with specific roles assigned to family members based on age, gender, and relationship to the couple. Spring festivals celebrating the end of winter often incorporate pre-Islamic traditions that have survived centuries of religious and political change. Fire-jumping ceremonies, water blessing rituals, and fertility celebrations blend seamlessly with Islamic observances, creating hybrid events that demonstrate Turkish culture as remarkable ability to absorb and adapt influences while maintaining distinct identity. Folk dancing at village festivals isn't performed for tourist entertainment. It is serious cultural business that requires skill, practice, and cultural knowledge. The young person who can't perform traditional dances properly faces social embarrassment that extends to their entire family. Dance competitions during festivals provide opportunities for villages to demonstrate their cultural sophistication while strengthening regional identities that sometimes transcend national boundaries. Music traditions and village festivals often preserve songs and instruments that have disappeared from urban areas. The elderly musician who can still play traditional instruments becomes a treasure whose knowledge gets passed down through formal and informal teaching relationships. Festival performances serve as both entertainment and education, with younger generations learning cultural history through songs that preserve everything from agricultural techniques to historical events. Food competitions during festivals create friendly rivalries that can influence village social dynamics for entire seasons. The woman whose baklava consistently wins praise becomes a local celebrity, whose recipes get guarded like state secrets, while those whose contributions receive lukewarm reception might find themselves excluded from future cooking committees. Storytelling traditions during evening festival gatherings preserve oral histories that wouldn't survive otherwise. The grandfather who can recite traditional tales keeps cultural memory alive, while entertaining mixed stage audiences that include everyone from restless toddlers to skeptical teenagers. These stories often contain practical wisdom about everything from weather prediction to conflict resolution, disguised as entertainment but serving educational functions. Religious processions and ceremonies during major festivals demonstrate village unity, while providing opportunities for displaying individual piety and social status. The family that contributes generously to festival expenses or provides exceptional service gains recognition that translates into social capital, while those who participate minimally might find themselves gradually excluded from community decision-making processes. Living on $600 a month in a Turkish village isn't just possible. It might actually provide a higher quality of life than spending 3 times that amount in most Western cities. However, the financial equation involves more than simple mathematics. Successfully managing rural Turkish economics requires understanding social obligations, seasonal variations, and cultural expectations that can make or break your budget in ways no spreadsheet can predict. Housing costs in villages can seem almost fictional compared to urban prices. A traditional stone house with enough land for a garden might rent for $50 to $100 monthly, while purchasing similar property could cost less than most Americans spend on a used car. However, these bargain prices come with hidden expenses that catch newcomers off guard. Traditional houses require constant maintenance. Heating costs can skyrocket during harsh winters, and bringing properties up to modern standards often costs more than the original purchase price. Food expenses drop dramatically when you adopt village eating patterns. Families that maintain gardens, keep livestock, and preserve seasonal produce can eat extremely well while spending less than $100 monthly on groceries. Fresh vegetables, eggs, dairy products, and even meat can cost almost nothing when produced locally. However, imported foods, processed items, and restaurant meals remain expensive, forcing residents to adapt their diets to local production patterns. Transportation costs depend entirely on your lifestyle expectations and location. Village residents who rely on local buses, shared taxis, and occasional hitchhiking can manage transportation for less than $50 monthly. However, maintaining a private vehicle becomes essential in remote locations where public transportation operates sporadically or not at all. Fuel, maintenance, and insurance costs can consume significant portions of tight budgets. Healthcare expenses vary dramatically by region and individual needs. Basic medical care costs almost nothing in villages with functioning health clinics, but serious conditions requiring specialist treatment or hospitalization can create financial disasters for families without adequate insurance. Prescription medications often cost less than in Western countries, but accessing them requires trips to larger towns that add transportation and time costs. Utility costs remain reasonable in most villages, with electricity, water, and internet service available for under $100 monthly. However, service quality can be inconsistent, especially during winter storms or summer heat waves that strain local infrastructure. Backup heating sources, water storage systems, and alternative internet solutions add expenses that budget-conscious residents must consider. Social obligations create hidden costs that can stress tight budgets unexpectedly. Wedding gifts, religious donations, festival contributions, and community support obligations aren't optional expenses. They raise social requirements that determine your acceptance within village society. The foreigner who skimps on these contributions will find themselves gradually excluded from community life, which defeats the purpose of village living entirely. Seasonal income variations affect everyone in rural areas, with summer tourist seasons providing opportunities for additional earnings, while winter months offer limited income prospects. Successful village residents learn to save during profitable periods and minimize expenses during lean months, developing financial discipline that serves them throughout the year. Employment opportunities for foreigners remain limited in most villages, with language barriers, legal restrictions, and cultural expectations creating additional challenges. Teaching English, offering technical skills, or developing online businesses provide possible income sources, but success requires patience, cultural sensitivity, and realistic expectations about earning potential. The psychological adjustment to village economics can challenge people accustomed to urban convenience and variety. Shopping requires planning, with weekly trips to larger towns necessary for items unavailable locally. The spontaneous restaurant meal, last-minute shopping trip, or impulse purchase becomes impossible when the nearest store is an hour away and closes at sunset. Banking and financial services operate differently in rural areas with limited ATM access, irregular internet connectivity, and traditional payment methods still preferred for many transactions. Managing finances requires maintaining cash reserves, understanding local banking hours, and developing relationships with merchants who might extend credit during temporary shortfalls. Long-term financial planning becomes crucial when living on limited incomes in isolated locations. Emergency funds for medical crises, property maintenance, or economic downturns can mean the difference between comfortable village life and financial disaster that forces unwanted relocations. Transportation in Turkish villages operates according to rules that would confuse urban traffic planners and delight adventure travel enthusiasts in equal measure. Forget rigid schedules, predictable routes, and comfortable vehicles. Rural Turkish transportation runs on flexibility, personal relationships, and sometimes pure luck. The village bus system deserves recognition as one of humanity's most creative transportation solutions. These aren't the climate-controlled, GPS-equipped vehicles you might expect. Village buses are often repurposed vehicles that have lived several previous lives as city buses, delivery trucks, or even military transports. They operate on schedules that exist more in theory than practice, with departure times influenced by weather conditions, passenger loads, market days, and the driver's personal obligations. Shared taxis fill gaps in the bus network, creating impromptu transportation networks that connect villages with larger towns. The Dolmus system operates on principles of community cooperation and economic efficiency that would impress business school professors if they could experience it firsthand. Passengers pile into vehicles designed for fewer people, baggage gets strapped wherever it fits, and livestock occasionally joins human passengers for trips to market towns. Tractor transportation isn't just for agricultural products. It is often the most reliable way to move people and goods in mountainous regions, where conventional vehicles struggle with steep grades and narrow paths. The farmer who owns a reliable tractor often becomes an unofficial transportation provider for neighbors who need to move furniture, transport elderly relatives, or haul supplies for market towns. Walking remains the primary transportation method for many daily activities, with village layouts designed around pedestrian movement rather than vehicle access. The morning walk to tend livestock, afternoon trips to neighbors' houses, and evening strolls to the tea house create social opportunities while providing exercise. That keeps rural residents remarkably fit well into old age. Donkey and mule transport persists in regions where modern vehicles can't navigate narrow mountain paths or rocky terrain. These animals aren't quaint tourist attractions. They're working partners whose knowledge of local terrain often exceeds that of human residents. The family that maintains healthy pack animals gains significant economic advantages in areas where conventional transportation fails. Motorcycle and scooter ownership has increased dramatically as road conditions improve and economic opportunities expand. These vehicles provide independence and flexibility that transforms daily life for residents who previously relied entirely on communal transportation. However, weather conditions, road quality, and cargo limitations create ongoing challenges that require constant adaptation. Seasonal transportation patterns reflect the agricultural rhythms that still dominate village life. Harvest seasons bring increased vehicle traffic as crops move to markets, while winter weather can isolate communities for days or weeks when roads become impassable. Residents develop seasonal strategies for transportation that include stockpiling supplies, maintaining emergency communication systems, and preparing alternative routes. The social aspects of village transportation create networks that serve functions beyond simple movement of people and goods. The bus driver who knows everyone's family situation often serves as informal messenger, counselor, and community coordinator. Transportation hubs become social gathering places where information gets exchanged, relationships develop, and community business gets conducted. Emergency transportation presents ongoing challenges in remote villages where medical crises, fire emergencies, or security situations require rapid response capabilities that may not exist locally. Communities develop informal emergency networks that rely on vehicle owners, communication systems, and mutual aid agreements that can mean the difference between life and death during critical situations. Infrastructure limitations affect all transportation methods, with road maintenance, fuel availability, and mechanical services operating at levels that would frustrate urban residents but represent significant improvements over historical conditions. The village that gains paved road access experiences economic and social transformations that ripple through all aspects of community life. The villages that appear in travel magazines represent a tiny fraction of rural Turkish destinations that offer experiences unavailable anywhere else in the Mediterranean world. Beyond the well-photographed tourist villages lie communities that preserve authentic lifestyles, maintain ancient traditions, and provide cultural immersion opportunities that would satisfy the most demanding anthropology. Professor, Cappadocia's underground cities extend far beyond the famous tourist sites, with smaller villages maintaining cave houses, underground storage systems, and rock-carved churches that receive few visitors but offer more authentic experiences than their famous neighbors. The families that still live in traditional cave dwellings aren't performing for tourists. They rate continuing lifestyles that have adapted successfully to local geology and climate for over a millennium. Black Sea mountain villages perched on impossibly steep slopes offer landscapes so dramatic they seem computer-generated, but they also preserve cultural traditions that have survived Ottoman rule, Soviet influence, and modern Turkish nationalism. The women who still wear traditional costumes aren't dressing up for festivals. Those are their everyday work clothes, designed for mountain agriculture and weather conditions that would challenge modern outdoor gear. Mediterranean fishing villages along Turkey's southern coast offer authentic experiences with communities that still rely primarily on traditional fishing methods rather than tourism revenue. Anatolian plateau villages showcase adaptations to extreme climate conditions that would challenge modern survival experts. Hot spring villages throughout Turkey offer therapeutic experiences that combine natural healing with traditional treatments that have been refined over generations. These aren't commercial spa resorts. They are communities built around natural resources whose healing properties have been recognized and utilized since ancient times. The languages, foods, and customs found in these communities often blend Turkish traditions with influences from neighboring countries, creating hybrid cultures that exist nowhere else. Artisan villages, specializing in traditional crafts, maintain techniques that have survived industrial competition through quality and cultural authenticity that machines can't replicate. The potter whose family has worked the same clay deposits for generations. The weaver who creates carpets using traditional patterns and natural dyes. Or the metal worker who forges tools, using ancient techniques preserve knowledge that represents irreplaceable cultural heritage. The village that seems perfectly located for peaceful retirement might become a nightmare. If medical emergencies arise and professional care is hours away by uncertain transportation. Educational opportunities for children create ongoing concerns for families considering village life. While some rural schools provide excellent education that prepares students for university study, others struggle with limited resources, outdated materials, and teacher shortages that compromise educational quality. Parents must balance the benefits of village childhood against potential limitations on their children's future opportunities. The village that appears perfect for remote work might prove impossible for maintaining online businesses or staying connected with distant family members. Weather conditions, infrastructure limitations, and service provider priorities create additional variables that affect connectivity reliability. Social integration challenges face anyone attempting to join established village communities, with cultural differences, language barriers, and generational conflicts creating obstacles that require patience, flexibility, and genuine commitment to overcome. The foreigner who expects to maintain urban lifestyle expectations while enjoying village benefits will likely frustrate both themselves and their new neighbors. Economic opportunities remain limited in most rural areas, with traditional agriculture, small-scale tourism, and government employment providing the primary income sources. The educated professional who relocates expecting to maintain previous income levels might find themselves forced to adapt to significantly reduced earning potential, or develop entirely new skill sets that match local economic realities. Infrastructure limitations affect daily life in ways that urban residents rarely consider. Power outages during storms, water shortages during dry seasons, and communication disruptions during equipment failures create inconveniences that require backup plans and alternative solutions. The village lifestyle that seems charmingly simple during summer visits might prove frustrating during winter isolation or emergency situations. Legal complexities surrounding property ownership, residency requirements, and business operations create potential problems that require professional guidance to navigate successfully. The foreigner who assumes that rural areas operate with fewer regulations might discover that bureaucratic requirements are actually more complex when dealing with multiple government levels and traditional authority structures. Cultural expectations regarding participation in community activities, religious observances, and social obligations create ongoing pressures that some newcomers find overwhelming. The resident who attempts to maintain complete privacy or avoid community involvement will likely find themselves gradually excluded from village social networks that provide essential support and information. Environmental challenges, including extreme weather conditions, natural disasters, and climate change effects impact village life in ways that urban areas can often avoid or mitigate through infrastructure and services. However, these visas prohibit employment, property ownership, and certain business activities that might become attractive. After experiencing village life firsthand, the tourist who falls in love with village living must plan carefully to transition to legal long-term resident status. Residence permits require documentation that can prove challenging to obtain. While living in remote villages, employment contracts, property ownership documents, or family relationship evidence must meet specific requirements that often demand multiple trips to government offices in major cities. The application process can take months, during which applicants might need to leave Turkey temporarily to avoid overstaying tourist visa limits. Property ownership by foreigners involves restrictions and procedures that vary by location, with certain border areas and military zones completely prohibited for foreign ownership. The village house that seems perfect for retirement might be located in a zone where foreign ownership is impossible, requiring alternative arrangements like Turkish citizenship, marriage to Turkish citizens, or complex legal partnerships with local residents. Work permits for foreigners remain difficult to obtain, especially in rural areas where employment opportunities are limited, and bureaucratic support is minimal. Teaching English, consulting work, or online businesses might provide income opportunities. But legal compliance requires proper documentation and tax registration that can prove complex to maintain from village locations. Tax obligations affect all residents regardless of citizenship status, with income taxes, property taxes, and business registration requirements that apply to village residents just as they do to urban dwellers. The complexity increases for foreign residents who might also face tax obligations in their home countries, requiring professional guidance to avoid double taxation or legal violations. Banking requirements for long-term residents include establishing Turkish bank accounts, obtaining tax identification numbers, and maintaining financial documentation that proves ongoing legal resident status. The village that lacks banking services might require regular trips to urban areas for financial transactions that city dwellers take for granted. Insurance requirements cover everything from mandatory vehicle insurance to optional health insurance that can provide crucial protection for foreign residents. Understanding coverage options, claim procedures, and provider networks requires research that might prove challenging when conducted from remote village locations with limited internet access. Healthcare registration involves obtaining Turkish health insurance or private coverage that provides access to medical services. The procedures for registration, provider selection, and coverage verification can prove complex, especially when language barriers complicate communication with insurance representatives and medical providers. Educational requirements affect families with children who need enrollment in Turkish schools or compliance with homeschooling regulations. The procedures for transferring academic records, meeting language requirements, and maintaining educational standards acceptable to both Turkish authorities and home country requirements demand careful planning and ongoing documentation. Legal representation becomes essential for complex transactions, property disputes, or bureaucratic challenges that exceed individual capabilities. Finding qualified attorneys who speak appropriate languages and understand rural property law. Immigration requirements and local government procedures requires research and referrals that might not be readily available in village settings. Standing in a Turkish village square where satellite dishes compete with mosque minarets for skyline space, where smartphones coexist with traditional tea glasses, and where ancient customs blend seamlessly with global connectivity, you realize that rural Turkey doesn't represent a retreat from modernity. It represents a unique synthesis of old and new that offers insights into sustainable living, community cooperation, and cultural preservation that the modern world desperately needs. The elderly woman who checks her grandchildren as social media accounts between sessions of traditional bread making is experiencing cultural conflict. She is demonstrating adaptability that has allowed Turkish village culture to survive countless political upheavals, economic changes, and social transformations while maintaining essential elements of community identity and mutual support. Technology adoption in villages follows patterns that prioritize practical benefits over novelty, with smartphones' value for family communication, agricultural weather forecasts, and access to government services rather than entertainment or social media consumption. The farmer who uses GPS technology to optimize planting patterns while maintaining traditional crop rotation. Methods exemplifies the pragmatic approach to modernity that characterizes a successful village. Adaptation. Economic integration with global markets has transformed agricultural practices while preserving cultural traditions, with olive oil producers using modern processing equipment to create products that meet international quality standards while maintaining traditional cultivation methods that their grandfathers would recognize. The balance between efficiency and authenticity requires constant negotiation, but produces results that benefit both local communities and international consumers. Educational opportunities now extend beyond village boundaries through internet connectivity, allowing students to access university courses, professional training, and cultural exchanges while remaining rooted in their home communities. The teenager who studies computer programming online while helping with family livestock represents a new generation that refuses to choose between traditional values and modern opportunities. The challenges facing Turkish villages aren't unique. They reflect global trends toward urbanization, economic consolidation, and cultural homogenization that threaten rural communities worldwide. However, the solutions being developed in Turkish villages, from cooperative agriculture to cultural tourism to technology-enhanced traditional crafts, offer models for rural sustainability that could benefit communities facing similar challenges anywhere in the world. Environmental consciousness in villages often exceeds urban levels, not from ideological commitment but from practical necessity and traditional knowledge that has always emphasized resource conservation and sustainable practices. The village that maintains traditional water management systems while installing solar panels demonstrates environmental awareness that combines ancient wisdom with modern technology. The question isn't whether you could adapt to Turkish village life. It asks whether you're ready to embrace a lifestyle that challenges modern assumptions about privacy, individualism, and material success while offering rewards in community connection, cultural richness, and life satisfaction that can't be measured in economic terms alone. The hidden Turkey that exists beyond Istanbul's tourist districts and Ankara's government offices offers experiences that will change your perspective on community, family, tradition, and the possibilities for human happiness in an increasingly connected, but often disconnected, world. The only question remaining is whether you're brave enough to accept the invitation that these communities extend to anyone willing to approach them with respect, patience, and genuine interest in learning what they have to teach. Comment below if you're ready to trade your urban convenience for village community. And don't forget to subscribe for more explorations of the world as hidden cultural treasures that guidebooks never mention.